The house was quiet when she returned earlier than expected, her steps slow and careful, one hand instinctively resting on her rounded belly. She had spent the afternoon at a routine prenatal checkup, eager to share the joy of hearing their baby's heartbeat again with her husband. She imagined him smiling, kissing her forehead, and making plans for their child's future. The thought filled her with warmth, but that warmth turned cold the moment she stepped inside. Something felt off. A pair of unfamiliar shoes rested carelessly near the stairs, and faint laughter, low, intimate, and utterly out of place, drifted down from the bedroom they once called sacred. Her heart began to race, a heavy thud against her ribs as dread coiled in her stomach. She forced herself up the stairs, each step an echo of her growing fear. With trembling hands, she pushed open the door, and the sight that met her eyes shattered her world in an instant. Her husband, the man who had sworn to love and protect her, was tangled in silk sheets with her closest friend. The very woman who had stood by her side through heartbreaks and triumphs, the one she had trusted like a sister, now lay smirking beside him, their betrayal laid bare without shame. The wife froze in the doorway, unable to breathe. Tears blurred her vision, her throat tightening as though the air itself had abandoned her. Her husband's eyes widened in panic, scrambling to pull the sheets over himself, stammering words that meant nothing. Excuses fell from his lips, but they were hollow, cowardly, like stones sinking into a pit of lies. Her best friend, however, showed no such fear. She leaned lazily against the pillows, her lips curling into a smile that dripped with cruel satisfaction. "You weren't supposed to find out this way," she said, her tone unapologetic, almost mocking. The words sliced deeper than any blade. The wife's body trembled, one hand clutching her stomach protectively as if shielding the innocent life inside from the ugliness before her. Anguish surged through her, an overwhelming tide of betrayal that threatened to drown her. This was not just a husband's infidelity, it was the collapse of her faith in two people she had loved most. Her sobs broke the silence, raw and desperate, echoing against the walls of the room that had now become a graveyard of her trust. She staggered back, unable to bear another second of the sight, the sound, the stench of betrayal. And though her husband called her name, though his panic grew with every step she took away, the damage was done. Something inside her had shattered forever. She remembered the first time she met him, back when life still felt like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. He had walked into the small cafe where she worked part-time during college, his presence commanding attention in a way that felt both intimidating and magnetic. He wasn't yet the millionaire he would become, but he carried himself like a man who believed destiny owed him greatness. His confident smile, the way he listened intently when she spoke, made her feel as though she was the only person in the room. It was intoxicating, and she, young and full of hope, fell hard before she even realized it. Their romance moved quickly, a whirlwind that left her dizzy but euphoric. He swept her off her feet with grand gestures, flowers sent to her dorm room, late-night drives where they planned their future, whispered promises that he would give her a life far beyond the ordinary. For the first time, she felt seen, cherished, chosen. Her friends warned her that his charm sometimes veered into arrogance, that his ambition burned so fiercely it might consume anyone standing too close. But she brushed those warnings aside, blinded by the belief that love could tame any flaw. When he struggled to build his first business, she stood firmly by his side. She sacrificed her own dreams of pursuing further studies, instead working long hours to support them both. Every paycheck she earned, she handed over without hesitation, telling herself it was an investment in their shared future. She endured nights alone while he chased opportunities, convincing herself that his absence was temporary, that it was all for them. She ignored the little cracks, the way he sometimes dismissed her opinions, the way he flirted too easily with other women, the way he seemed to love the idea of her more than her presence. Love, she thought, was about patience and faith. And she had both in abundance. When his business finally took off and the wealth began to flow in, she felt vindicated. Every sacrifice seemed worth it, every lonely night justified by the luxurious life they now shared. She believed they had built their success together, that she was not just his wife but his partner, his anchor. Trust became the foundation of her devotion. She never questioned his late meetings or the constant calls. Why would she? He was her husband, the man who once promised her forever with such conviction that she had staked her life on it. She had no way of knowing that the very trust she clung to so tightly would one day become the weapon that destroyed her. From the outside, the best friend's smile always seemed genuine, her laughter warm, her support unwavering. She was there for every milestone, helping choose the wedding dress, standing proudly as maid of honor, and later celebrating the news of the pregnancy with tears in her eyes. To the wife, she was family, a sister by choice. But beneath the surface of her affectionate gestures festered a bitterness that grew with every passing year. She had watched her friend marry a man who seemed to embody every dream she herself had once carried. Wealth, charm, a future carved in ambition, all the things she longed for, yet never received. Each time she entered their grand home, each time she saw the glittering gifts he showered on his wife, envy gnawed at her. She told herself she deserved the same life, that she was just as beautiful, just as worthy, but life had dealt her an unfair hand. The resentment turned poisonous, feeding her desire not just to have what her friend had, but to take it away. Her manipulative tactics began subtly, cloaked in the guise of friendship. She praised the husband excessively, laughing a little too long at his jokes, brushing his arm when she leaned in close. When his wife wasn't around, she planted seeds of doubt, whispering that his wife didn't truly appreciate his sacrifices, that she took his hard work for granted. Slowly, she positioned herself as the one who understood him best, the confidant who always agreed, who always admired. The husband, flattered by the attention and blinded by vanity, began to lean into her manipulations. She fueled his ego, making him feel invincible, convincing him that he deserved more than just the devotion of one woman. She dangled her availability like bait, playing coy yet deliberate, knowing he would eventually bite. The pregnancy only deepened her envy. She watched her friend glow with maternal joy, watched the millionaire's wealth secure a future for a child that wasn't hers. It stung like fire in her chest. Instead of celebrating, she plotted, determined to shatter the perfect image of a family she could never have. When the affair finally began, she felt an intoxicating sense of victory. Each stolen moment with him was more than passion. It was proof that she had taken what wasn't hers, proof that she could wound her friend in the deepest way possible. In her mind, it wasn't betrayal, it was justice, payback for years of standing in the shadow of someone else's happiness. The days after the discovery blurred into a haze of anguish, each moment heavier than the last. She wandered through the mansion like a ghost, the walls that once echoed with laughter now suffocating with silence. At night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the scene over and over again. The sheets, the laughter, the shameless smirk of her best friend, the panic in her husband's eyes. Sleep became impossible, every attempt shattered by nightmares that dragged her back to that doorway of betrayal. Her body, already fragile from carrying new life, trembled beneath the weight of her emotions. Stress clamped down on her like iron chains. Her hands shook when she tried to eat, though food had lost all taste. Her heart raced unpredictably, sometimes so fast she thought it might stop. The doctor had warned her to avoid strain, to keep her pregnancy peaceful for the baby's sake, but peace felt like a foreign language she could no longer understand. The life inside her deserved calm and love, yet all she could give was a body racked with grief. She cried until her chest ached, until her voice broke into hoarse whispers. The man who once swore to protect her had instead inflicted the deepest wound, leaving her questioning every moment of their past. Had his promises ever been real? Or had she been nothing more than a placeholder until temptation arrived? Each thought cut her deeper, and the pain spiraled endlessly. Worse still was the betrayal of her best friend. The woman she trusted with secrets, the one who held her hand through heartbreaks, the one who was supposed to share her joy, she had been the one to twist the knife. It was more than infidelity. It was a demolition of trust so profound that it left her unable to tell where her pain ended and her rage began. She felt broken from the inside out, abandoned by both love and friendship in one cruel strike. Her family called often, sensing something was wrong, but she lied, too ashamed to tell them the truth. She feared their pity as much as their anger. Alone, she pressed her hand against her belly, whispering apologies to the child she carried. She begged the baby to hold on, to survive the storm raging inside her. For though her heart felt shattered, She clung desperately to the fragile hope that her child could still be her reason to keep living. When the truth finally slipped out, it was to her brothers. The two men who had been her guardians long before marriage tied her to another. She had tried to hide it, swallowing her pain, but her trembling voice on the phone betrayed her. Within hours, they were at her side, their presence a wall of strength against the chaos that had consumed her life. The sight of their sister, pale and exhausted with swollen eyes and a hand clutching her belly as though protecting the child from the world, lit a fire in them that no storm could extinguish. They were not ordinary men. Both were lawyers, sharp and relentless in the courtroom. One specialized in corporate law, the other in family litigation. Together, they had a reputation for being a force no opponent wanted to face. But beyond their professional titles, they were brothers. Men who had carried her on their shoulders as a child, who had defended her from bullies, who had sworn silently to never let her suffer alone. Seeing her broken by betrayal transformed their loyalty into fury. They listened carefully as she poured out the story, her voice cracking with every word. They didn't interrupt, but their clenched jaws and hardened eyes said everything. When she finished, one placed a hand on hers, steady and sure. "You won't fight this alone," he said firmly. "He doesn't get to hurt you and walk away." The other nodded, already thinking ahead, already piecing together the strategy that would dismantle the husband's arrogance piece by piece. Their protectiveness went beyond emotion, it was tactical, precise. They gathered evidence, tracked the husband's movements, and secured proof of the affair with the so-called best friend. They dissected his finances, uncovering every hidden account, every shady deal he thought buried. With every file they compiled, with every document they highlighted, her confidence began to return. For the first time since the betrayal, she felt like she had allies who could turn her pain into power. To her brothers, this wasn't just a legal battle, it was personal. They weren't simply defending a client, they were defending their blood, their sister, and the innocent child she carried. And while the millionaire had his wealth and his arrogance, they had something stronger: truth, skill, and the unbreakable bond of family. They became her shield, vowing that this time, justice would not slip away. From the husband's perspective, the betrayal did not feel like the end of the world. At least, not at first. He lounged in his grand office, sipping whiskey and convincing himself that money would patch everything. Wealth had always been his shield, and power his weapon. Problems disappeared when he threw enough cash at them, and people bent to his will when he reminded them who held the purse strings. To him, this was just another inconvenience, another mess he could silence with lawyers and settlements. He underestimated his wife deeply. In his mind, she had always been gentle, forgiving, the kind of woman who loved too much to ever leave. He convinced himself she was too fragile, especially with a child on the way, to truly fight back. "She'll calm down," he muttered to himself, brushing off the memory of her devastated face. "She always does." That arrogance, rooted in years of taking her loyalty for granted, blinded him to the storm brewing against him. When he learned her brothers had stepped in, he smirked. To him, they were just lawyers, no different from the dozens he had bought and silenced over the years. He chuckled at the thought of them trying to challenge him, the millionaire whose name commanded respect in every boardroom. "They'll fold," he told his mistress one night, pulling her close as though she were proof of his untouchable life. "Everyone folds eventually. But arrogance is a dangerous illusion." He didn't notice the cracks forming in his empire, employees whispering about his scandal, business partners distancing themselves, and quiet investigations into his financial dealings. He didn't see the way his wife was changing, no longer shattered but slowly rising, fueled by strength he thought she didn't have. Instead, he strutted around as though the world still belonged to him. He underestimated not only his wife's resolve but the fierce brilliance of her brothers, who were not intimidated by his money or his name. His pride convinced him the battle would be quick, that he would emerge unscathed. But in his arrogance, he failed to realize that this time, the game was different. This time, he wasn't facing strangers, he was facing family bound by love, and no amount of money could silence them. The courtroom became a stage, and for the first time in his life, the millionaire was not the one in control. He walked in with his usual swagger, tailored suit gleaming, a smug smile fixed to his face as though the entire ordeal were a performance beneath him. His mistress, seated behind him, whispered encouragement, her eyes sparkling with misplaced confidence. But across the aisle sat his wife, visibly pregnant, her brothers flanking her like sentinels. Their presence radiated strength and certainty, a contrast to his arrogance. The brothers wasted no time. Their strategy was precise and relentless, like surgeons cutting open wounds the millionaire thought would never be exposed. The first brother presented photographs, undeniable evidence of the affair with the wife's best friend. The jury's collective gasp echoed through the chamber, and the millionaire's smirk faltered for the first time. Still, he sat straighter, convincing himself that infidelity alone was not enough to topple him. He had weathered worse storms. Or so he believed. But then came the second brother, armed with documents, bank statements, hidden accounts, and financial dealings the millionaire had worked hard to bury. Slowly, the neat facade of his wealth and power unraveled under the weight of undeniable proof. Transactions revealed hush payments, investments funneled through shell companies, and debts he had kept even from his wife. The courtroom shifted as murmurs spread, the millionaire's carefully curated image of control cracking with every word spoken. What shook him most, however, was not the evidence of money or betrayal. It was the testimony carefully woven into the case. The story of his wife's anguish. The sleepless nights, the emotional collapse, the dangerous stress on her pregnancy, all laid bare before the court. The brothers painted her not as a victim but as a woman wronged beyond measure, forced to carry both the weight of betrayal and the burden of protecting her unborn child. The jury's faces hardened with empathy for her and disdain for him. As the day dragged on, the millionaire's confidence shrank. His lawyers scrambled, objecting wherever possible, but the brothers anticipated every move, dismantling his defense with calm precision. Each objection, overruled, was another nail in the coffin of his arrogance. By the end of the session, the man who had walked in radiating superiority now sat with clenched fists and a tightening jaw, realizing for the first time that his wealth could not shield him here. The brothers had turned the courtroom into his reckoning, and it was only the beginning. The best friend had walked into the courtroom with her head held high, dressed to impress as though appearances could erase the truth. She still clung to the fantasy that she could talk her way out of anything, that charm and confidence would shield her from the consequences of her betrayal. But the brothers were merciless. When she was called to the stand, their questions were like arrows, sharp and unyielding, piercing through every flimsy excuse she tried to spin. At first, she played the victim. She claimed the affair was a mistake, a moment of weakness, an accident born out of loneliness. But the brothers countered her narrative with damning messages, text exchanges where she openly mocked the wife, boasting about stealing her life, her husband, and the future she thought should have been hers. Each message projected onto the screen felt like a dagger to the wife, but it was also a rope tightening around the best friend's neck. The jury watched in disgust, their sympathy evaporating as her true character came to light. The humiliation deepened when the brothers revealed financial transactions. Not only had she betrayed her closest friend, but she had also siphoned money from the millionaire, taking advantage of his recklessness to enrich herself. Trips, jewelry, designer clothes, all traced back to secret accounts and lavish spending. What she thought had been cleverly hidden was now spread across the courtroom, leaving her no place to hide. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed like vultures. News outlets devoured the scandal, best friend turns mistress, betrayal of a lifetime, from confidant to homewrecker. Her once polished reputation crumbled under the weight of headlines, her name trending not with admiration but with ridicule. Friends who once envied her now cut ties, horrified by the betrayal. Family members distanced themselves, unable to bear the shame. Inside, as the courtroom session adjourned for the day, she sat trembling, mascara streaked from tears she could no longer control. Gone was the confidence, gone was the smugness she once wore like armor. In its place was the stark reality that she was not the heroine of her story but the villain, exposed, despised, and abandoned. She had gambled everything for greed and envy, and now she was left with nothing but the bitter taste of her downfall. The courtroom's final verdict carried the weight of justice, echoing like a thunderclap through the lives of everyone involved. The wife sat tall, her brothers beside her, their faces calm but triumphant. Months of preparation, emotional battles, and unrelenting determination had led to this moment. The judge's ruling was clear. Custody of the unborn child was granted to the wife without dispute, ensuring she would raise her baby in safety and love, free from the toxic influence of the millionaire. The room shifted, eyes turning toward her, no longer with pity but with respect for a woman who had endured betrayal and risen stronger. The financial settlement was just as decisive. Years of hidden accounts, shady dealings, and squandered wealth were laid bare by her brother's relentless work. The court ordered a division of assets, granting the wife financial security that could not be taken from her. Properties, investments, and accounts were split, ensuring she would never again be vulnerable to his control. What the millionaire thought would destroy her instead became the foundation for her independence. His arrogance, once bolstered by wealth and status, crumbled as he realized that what he once held tightly was slipping through his fingers. The millionaire sat motionless, his jaw clenched, as the judge spoke the final words of the divorce decree. The woman he had betrayed and discarded now stood as his equal in law, but far above him in dignity. He had underestimated her, believing her too fragile to fight, but the strength of her love for her child and the unwavering loyalty of her brothers had transformed her into someone unbreakable. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and the public cheered for her victory. She was no longer just a betrayed wife. She had become a symbol of resilience and justice. Meanwhile, the millionaire slipped away through a side door, his head bowed, his reputation shredded by scandal. Business partners withdrew, friends vanished, and the mistress, once his partner in deception, had already abandoned him. He had lost not only his wealth but also the respect he thought was unshakable. For the wife, it was more than a legal win. It was the closing of one painful chapter and the beginning of another, filled with hope, security, and the quiet triumph of knowing she had reclaimed her life. The storm had finally passed, and for the first time in months, the wife could breathe freely. The weight of betrayal no longer suffocated her, it had been replaced by a calm strength, one she never imagined she could carry. With her brothers by her side, she found herself stepping into motherhood with dignity and pride, no longer haunted by the shadows of her past. Every kick of her unborn child reminded her not of pain, but of survival, of the love and protection that surrounded her now. Her brothers, who had fought tirelessly in court, now poured the same energy into ensuring she never felt alone again, proving that loyalty and family were stronger than any wealth or betrayal. Her days slowly filled with peace. She decorated a nursery, choosing colors of warmth and light, symbols of the fresh start she was determined to embrace. Nights were quieter now, no longer filled with tears and sleepless anguish but with the steady rhythm of hope. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers who had followed her story greeted her with admiration and respect. She had become a figure of resilience, a woman who had taken the ashes of betrayal and rebuilt her world with grace. Meanwhile, the millionaire's life spiraled into a cold emptiness. The mistress was long gone, vanishing the moment his wealth was divided and his status diminished. Former allies avoided him, unwilling to be associated with disgrace. His once grand home echoed with silence, the emptiness serving as a constant reminder of what he had thrown away. He replayed the betrayal in his mind, how quickly he had traded loyalty for lust, and each memory of his wife's strength in court made his regret sharper. The contrast between their worlds could not have been clearer. Where she was surrounded by family, preparing to welcome new life, he sat alone, consumed by loneliness. Where she had found dignity in justice, he drowned in the consequences of his arrogance. As the wife stood by the window one evening, her hand resting gently on her belly, she whispered a quiet promise to her child. Their life would be built on love, loyalty, and respect, the very things that had saved her. Her story was proof that betrayal could shatter trust, but resilience and justice could rebuild it stronger than ever. And with that, she stepped fully into her new beginning, leaving him forever behind.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.